Greeting, this is Ron on the Encyclopedia team. It is with great pleasure we have Professor Andrew Hursthouse joining us for this interview. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Ron, for inviting me. I'm very happy to chat with you today.
So, Professor Hursthouse, before we dive in, our audiences would love to get to know you a bit better. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Certainly, yeah. So I guess I started my scientific research career after graduating from the University of Reading near London in the UK with a degree in geochemistry. And then I studied in the University of Glasgow for a PhD, which was focused on the geochemistry of radionuclides in the environment from nuclear waste. And I postdoced for a period after that in Glasgow and looked at the impact of waste discharge from the nuclear industry on the wider environment, developing measurement systems and using those to trace the path of quite exotic elements in the environment like neptunium and plutonium. And then in the beginning of the 1990s, I joined what is now the University of the West of Scotland as a junior lecturer and became senior lecturer and professor, essentially working on research program looking at environmental impacts of wastes in the environment and discharges to the environment in the air, water, and on land. And I've served as a head of department after becoming a professor and also assistant dean for research. I've also worked in a number of overseas institutions as a visiting expert, a long period working in China, which finished more recently as an invited scholar in Hunan University of Science and Technology. And our work is very much at the interface of the environment and human activity, working on observations of environmental impact, but also how industry and policy are framed to try to improve environmental conditions. And that requires very much a collaborative approach with other disciplines, which is something that I really enjoy the challenge working in and supporting colleagues to also engage in that activity. So it's very much a history of collaboration, developing observations on environmental impacts and its improvement, which led more recently to a contribution in the emerging fight against antimicrobial resistance in the environment, and a particularly challenging topic for the future.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Now let's move on to the main focus of this interview. Be of great research interest. Why is it important to study and know better of the impact of environmental conditions on antimicrobial resistance, or in short, AMR?
Yeah, sure. It's a really significant international priority. It's something that is snowballing in terms of impact on society. Resistance to treatment and therapeutics in society is growing through the use, and ironically, the widespread use is compounding that impact. So medically, it's well known, well understood, but the solution to the problem is really much more complicated. We have a need to have medication to treat conditions, but that treatment process is also reducing the effectiveness. And this covers a whole variety of context in terms of human as well as animal health, and the role of the environment and environmental conditions on that developing resistance is again something that we have very limited understanding, and that is a major focus of the work that we've started in collaboration across institutions and governments.
Thank you. So we know you are working on the environmental prevalence of AMR. Could you please introduce it and how it might help?
Yeah, sure. It's very much about trying to get an understanding of the nature of the environmental influences on the prevalence of AMR. So how, for example, pollutants might impact on microbiome in the environment and enhance the selectivity and promotion of resistance in the microbiome, and using approaches from microbiology as well as geochemistry, we can try to extract that relationship. It's complex in terms of the multiple pollutants that can be of influence, but by focusing on particular environmental situations, such as where we have waste discharges to the environment, we can then try to study in more detail that interaction and use that knowledge to try to explain the development and perhaps look at mechanisms that can be suppressed, if you like, to try to reduce the ongoing development of AMR. It's very much at the sort of intersection of animal and human health and the environment, the One Health concept, which is also being promoted as a way of trying to effectively treat the problem and reduce the threat into the future.
Thank you very much for your answer. So, what do you think about the development of this research field and what's your perspective?
Yeah, okay. It is for an environmental scientist, for a geochemist, it is quite an emerging opportunity, if you like. The most important aspect of that is to have an involvement in a team collaborative approach, an interdisciplinary team that brings both the microbiology, the policy and the social aspects of the problem to the environmental conditions. And that in itself is quite a challenge, in that the interdisciplinary working is really difficult to make as effective as it can be because of the different approaches from the different disciplines. But where you can build good teams, then the future is extremely bright in terms of successful research endeavors. And it's nice to see that in many countries these initiatives are being promoted, and the results from this type of collaborative study are starting to filter into the public domain, and perhaps provide us an understanding which allows us to set goals for regulating the use of some of the antimicrobial and therapeutic agents, and look for new ways of challenging and tackling the growth of resistance.
I'm glad to hear that the future for this research field will be brighter. So, before we finish, is there any acknowledgement you would like to make?
Yeah, certainly. I would really acknowledge the ongoing collaboration that I have with many of my colleagues, both at the University of the West of Scotland and within other groups around the world. I've been very lucky as a scientist to benefit from very long and solid collaborative projects with a number of scientists, and also value the understanding these collaborations, or my collaborators have, of the geochemist's perspective when they might come from a different discipline. So that's made my research journey very rich, rewarding, and enjoyable. And the challenges are still there, and I hope that younger scientists are able to deal with them and try to address some of these critical issues which are becoming more prevalent in society.
As a Hursthouse, We wish you and your team the best of luck on your future research. And thank you very much for joining us again. And we sure hope that more future young scientists will join in your effort.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for the interview. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.